Okay, let's just dive right in. Today, we're looking at what might literally be the most invisible, yet absolutely everywhere piece of software in human history. We're talking about a system that completely ignores all the established rules of the tech industry, essentially runs the modern world, and yet gets practically zero credit for it.
1 trillion. Let that number sink in for a second. There are over 1 trillion active SQLite databases on Earth right now. I mean, we're talking about a reality where there are drastically more of these active databases humming away than there are human beings.
And here's where things get genuinely absurd. This mind-bending global scale, it's maintained by exactly 3 developers. Just 3, Richard Hipp, Dan Kennedy, and Joe Mistochekin. Every single bit of the architecture, the history, the complex reasoning behind this massive global infrastructure, it all lives solely in the heads of 3 guys.
Want to know what's even crazier? $0. They have taken absolutely $0 in venture capital funding. No massive funding rounds, no IPO, they've never been acquired. They operate as this tiny, fiercely independent fortress out in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is basically as far from the Silicon Valley norm as you can possibly get.
So why does this matter to you? Well, it's pretty simple. If you have a phone in your pocket right now, you are running hundreds of these databases at this exact moment. We're talking your iMessages, your Spotify library, Adobe Photoshop, WhatsApp, even the flight software on an Airbus A350. It is literally everywhere.
Section 1. The warship's origin story. Because, the origin of this invisible empire is just as wild as its massive scale today. The whole thing actually starts on a Navy-guided missile destroyer, the USS Oscar Austin, back in the year 2000. Richard Hipp, who is a contractor with a PhD in computational linguistics, was working on the ship's damage control system, but he kept hitting this massive, incredibly frustrating roadblock. The clunky Enterprise Informix database they were using kept crashing, and it was a terrible situation because whenever the database went down, Richard's software got the blame. Eventually, a government shutdown actually stalled his contract, which gave him the free time to just solve the problem himself.
He had this incredible light bulb moment. He asked himself, why do I need a separate process to store this data? Why can't I just read it directly from the disk myself? He didn't want a massive server playing middleman. He just wanted a database that existed as a single, simple file. So he built it. And eventually, he uploaded it to his own company's website as public domain, open source software.
From there, the idea spread like wildfire. Tinkerers started putting it on Palm Pilots. Then Motorola called and gave him an $80,000 contract to bake it right into their mobile OS. AOL put it on those legendary 5.0 CDs, and actually it survived an unnoticed temporary index bug during those negotiations. He even won a blind bake-off for Nokia's Symbian OS without even realizing he was competing. Eventually, Mitchell Baker from Mozilla stepped in to back a consortium that funded the project. But the absolutely critical piece here, they kept Richard in total, absolute control of the code.
Section 2. The 92 million line fortress. Because when Google's Android launched and scaled to millions and then hundreds of millions of phones, the bugs came pouring in. This massive new scale suddenly exposed every weird edge case that Richard's tiny team had never tested, and it genuinely threatened to drown them in bug reports.
Now, most companies would just hire an army of engineers to fix this, right? Well, Richard Hipp did something kind of insane instead. He turned to DO178B avionics standards. Basically, he decided to hold his completely free database to the exact same rigorous quality standard as the software that physically keeps airplanes from falling out of the sky.
The outcome of that decision is it's absurd. For 155,000 lines of source code, he wrote 92 million lines of test code. That is a 590-to-1 test-to-code ratio. He achieved 100% machine code coverage, meaning every single branch in the binary was tested. And the result, it essentially silenced their bug reports for nearly a decade. The engineering was just absolutely flawless.
Section 3. Monks, Puppies, and Zero VC. Because honestly, the engineering is only half the story here. The culture Richard built is what truly separates SQLite from the rest of the tech world. Operating a trillion databases with just 3 guys is vastly different from anything else in modern software. Just think about this contrast for a second. You have MongoDB going public at a $4 billion valuation, Snowflake IPOs at $33 billion. They have massive corporate campuses, thousands of engineers. Meanwhile, Richard's company in Charlotte is still run by his wife as president, with Richard as head of research, and they rely on exactly 0 outside funding.
To keep SQLite perfectly in the public domain and avoid restrictive licenses like the GPL, which, by the way, would legally block it from being used on iPhones or commercial planes, Richard just rewrote everything from scratch, and I mean everything. He relied on absolutely zero outside dependencies. He built his own parser, his own version control system, his own bug tracker, and even his own text editor, just so nobody could ever claim a copyright on his system.
The guy is deeply, deeply contrarian. Back in 2018, when the tech industry was heavily pressuring open source projects to adopt formal codes of conduct, Richard literally submitted the Rule of St. Benedict. Yes, a 1,500-year-old set of rules written for monks. That was his project's code of conduct. Now, he eventually added a standard guideline after some massive internet backlash, but he actually kept the monk rules as their internal ethical standard.
And instead of your typical MIT or Apache license file that you see in literally every other software project on Earth, he famously placed this deeply personal, devout Christian blessing at the top of every single source file. May you do good and not evil. May you find forgiveness for yourself and forgive others. May you share freely, never taking more than you give. It's wild to think the entire tech industry depends on code governed by a prayer.
He also completely rejects standard GitHub open source culture. Simply put, he doesn't want your help. He famously explained that accepting a community pull request is like accepting a free puppy. Sure, the puppy is free today, but now you've got to feed it, walk it, and maintain it for the next 25 years. He just doesn't want a kennel full of free puppies.
Section 4. The libSQL Rebellion. Because building a fortress that keeps out bad code also freezes out progress and community innovation. And eventually, the modern tech world was going to demand features that SQLite simply wasn't built for.
In 2018, a security team at Tencent found a vulnerability called Magellan. It was a remote code execution flaw that theoretically let hackers take over billions of Chromium-based browsers from afar. Now, Richard's tiny team patched it perfectly and quickly, but on Twitter, he dismissively called the threat greatly exaggerated. And this interaction really exposed the massive friction of a tiny, localized team waving off security researchers from the biggest tech companies in the world.
It really forces us to ask what happens when you lock the whole world out. I mean, Apple and Google literally have to put their code contributions into physical file safes with signed legal affidavits just to get them into SQLite. But everyday developers who need modern features like edge computing, serverless workloads, and AI vector search, they hit a total brick wall. They just weren't allowed to contribute.
So, finally, startup founders Glauber Costa and Pekka Enberg at a company called Turso decided to fork the project. They called it libSQL. And remarkably, they launched it with 0 lines of new code, just a manifesto stating that the community deserved to enjoy widespread improvements. Well, in just 14 days, they gained 1,500 GitHub stars. Practically overnight, an army of contributors jumped in and added those highly demanded modern features, like native replication and AI vector search, that Richard had deliberately chosen not to do.
And Turso didn't just stop at the fork. They are now entirely rewriting SQLite from scratch in Rust, which is a memory-safe language. They're building a complete cleanroom implementation with no ties to the original architecture. Why? So they can completely control their own destiny without Richard's stubborn bottlenecks holding them back.
So what was Richard's response to the manifesto, the fork, and the entire rewrite of his life's work? Absolute silence. No angry Twitter threads, no lawsuits, nothing. He completely honored his own blessing to share freely, never taking more than you give, and simply let the community take the public domain code to do whatever they wanted with it.
As Richard continues his monastic, heads-down coding in Charlotte, promising, by the way, to support this database until the year 2050 when he'll be 89 years old, it leaves us with a truly fascinating paradox. Is the extreme stubbornness that built a flawless, trillion database empire the exact same trait that will eventually make it obsolete in our modern, community-driven world of software? Think about that the next time you use your phone. Thanks for exploring this with me today.